Bueno, bienvenidas y bienvenidos a esta actividad en el marco de la Semana de Estudios de Medio Oriente y Norte de África, que por segundo año tiene sede también en Morelia. Estoy muy emocionada de que tengamos con nosotras a Mona El-Tahawy, quien es escritora, periodista, activista feminista y una de las, me atrevo a decir, de las principales figuras del feminismo así casi en el mundo hoy en día. Su currículum es muy extenso, no quiero robarnos más tiempo. Pueden seguir su Instagram, Mona El-Tahawy, y en Substack su Feminist Giant newsletter. La conferencia va a ser en inglés. Yo voy a hacer un apoyo de traducción proyectando ahí escritas algunas ideas principales porque no tenemos los medios para traducción simultánea. En la sesión de preguntas y respuestas que seguirá, ustedes si quieren preguntar en inglés, adelante. Si les da como penita y prefieren mi ayuda, yo puedo traducir su pregunta. Ya sin más, yo voy a irme para allá para hacer lo de la traducción y les dejo aquí con Mona El-Tahawy, que nos va a hablar del papel del feminismo en estos tiempos de autoritarismo. You're welcome, and they're all yours.
Thank you, Katerina. Thank you.
I'll be right here.
Thank you. Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. As you heard, my name is Mona El-Tahawy, and I use the pronouns she and her. And I begin my talk with you today in the way that I begin my talks everywhere I go, and that is to say I call it my declaration of faith. Fuck the patriarchy. What's fuck the patriarchy in Spanish? How do you say that in Spanish, Caterina?
Let's fuck the patriarchy.
Yeah, fuck the patriarchy in Spanish.
A la mierda del patriarcado.
Yeah. So where I was born in Egypt, and when I was 7, my family moved to London because my parents got a scholarship from the Egyptian government to study for their PhD in medicine. My parents are now retired, but my parents were both medical doctors. So we moved to London when I was 7, and one of my most vivid memories at the age of 13 was watching a documentary that the BBC made about Egypt that featured the Egyptian feminist who has now died, called Nawal Saadawi. And I remember the first time I saw Nawal Saadawi, she had this amazing bright white hair, and she spoke so confidently and so forcefully about patriarchy and the consequences of patriarchy in Egypt. And I thought, wow, who is this woman who is so confident and who's speaking with so much power? And in the documentary, there was an Egyptian man who said, this woman, Nawal Saadawi, is ruining the reputation of Egypt. And I was a 13-year-old girl, and I thought, wow, how does one woman ruin the reputation of a country? This is amazing. I want to be like that. How do I learn to ruin the reputation of a country? Because it was amazing to me that, patriarchy, which is universal, and she is pointing out what happens in Egypt, and this man says, oh, this woman is ruining the country. She's ruining the reputation of the country because she's basically airing our dirty laundry for everyone to see. And so that was the first time I met, quote unquote, Nawal Saadawi on a television. And I thought, I want to be like this woman. And then when I was 15, my parents moved us to Saudi Arabia, where they taught in medical school. And I saw how my mother's life was changed radically living in Saudi Arabia. She could no longer drive. The law has changed slightly now, although not all women can benefit from the changes in the law against driving in Saudi Arabia. But my mother couldn't drive. We were all dependent on our father to take us everywhere, but she still had her career. She was a doctor who was teaching female students, and my father was a doctor teaching male students. And very soon after we moved to Saudi Arabia, I felt what we call reverse culture shock, because even though I'm from a Muslim majority country, and Saudi Arabia is a Muslim majority country, Saudi Arabia is very different to Egypt. And I fell into a deep depression, which I blame patriarchy for. And I will explain a bit more in a bit. But I didn't have the words for what was happening to me. So I was 15 years old and I was traumatized, I say traumatized into feminism because of the suffocation of the conservatism and the patriarchy in Saudi Arabia. I didn't have the word feminist until I was 19 years old and I started university in Saudi Arabia. I studied for 2 years at the King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. And one day at the university library, I discovered a set of feminist journals on the bookshelves of the library. Now, I don't know who put those journals on the bookshelf of the library because in 1986, 87 in Saudi Arabia, there was no women's and gender studies program in the university. But some librarian or maybe a professor who was a secret feminist put these journals on the bookshelves. And I remember the first time I opened these journals and I came across the work of feminists from my part of the world, from Southwest Asia, the Middle East, North Africa, like Nawal al-Saadawi, like the Moroccan sociologist Fatima Mernissi. And I remember reading them and being very grateful to have the word feminist from someone who was from my cultural and religious background, but I was also terrified. And I would go to the library every day and I would read these feminist journals, I would put them down and I would run away because I understood that what I was beginning was a journey of unraveling, that this feminism in these journals by women from my part of the world was going to help me to take apart something that I was told everywhere in Saudi Arabia was normal, was traditional, was religious, and these women were challenging it, and challenging it in a way from women who look like me, like the woman who is ruining the reputation of Egypt. And I understood then, when I discovered the word feminism, finally, that when something like that terrifies you on this fundamental level, it's often something that you need. And it's something that your instinct is telling you, this is going to save you. And so I went back again and again and again. And the words of Nawal al-Saadawi and Fatima Mernissi did save me. And they helped me to become the feminist that I am today. And then when I moved back to Egypt at the age of 21 to study journalism and to become a journalist, I finally met Nawal al-Saadawi in person and interviewed her many times. And I think the biggest lesson I got from her, besides how to ruin the reputation of a country as one feminist, is one of my favorite quotes by her from her novel, Woman at Point Zero, in which the protagonist, Firdaus, so Firdaus is a sex worker, and she is arrested because she is accused of murdering her pimp. And the character who is supposed to be Nawal al-Saadawi is sent to prison because in real life, Nawal al-Saadawi was imprisoned by the late President Anwar Sadat when he imprisoned many activists and many opponents. So Nawal al-Saadawi was sent to prison by Anwar Sadat. And in the novel, Woman at Point Zero, she has Firdaus as the protagonist, but she's the one, Nawal al-Saadawi's character is telling the story of Firdaus. So they share a prison cell, and she tells Firdaus, you know, what happened? Tell me your story. And Firdaus tells her that while she was standing trial, the judges said to her, you are a savage and dangerous woman. And Firdaus replied, I am speaking the truth, and the truth is savage and dangerous. And I love this quote because this is the feminism that we need. We need a feminism that is savage and dangerous because patriarchy is savage and dangerous. And we need a feminism that opposes it with the same degree and severity of savagery and danger. Because the feminism that I espouse is not a soft feminism, is not a gentle feminism. It is a feminism that has to confront patriarchy and ruin its reputation. So these lessons that I got from Nawal al-Saadawi and Fatima Mernissi taught me that feminism is not something alien to my culture. Because when I began my journalism and began to tell everyone I'm a feminist in Egypt, I would often hear, oh, this is a Western invention. This is a colonial invention. We don't need feminism in Egypt. We are good Muslims, we are good Christians, we are good Egyptians, we have Muslims and Christians in Egypt. And so I learned from Nawal Saadawi and Fatima Mernissi that we have a long history of feminism in my part of the world. Hoda Sha'rawi, in the early 1900s, launched Egypt's first feminist movement against patriarchy. And then Doreya Shafiq, another feminist and journalist in the 1950s, organized a protest in which 1,500 feminists stormed the Egyptian capital to demand the right to vote, because we had a revolution that was kind of also a coup by Gamal Abdel Nasser that liberated us from British occupation and from the monarchy, but did not liberate women from patriarchy. So this was a lesson, Doreya Shafiq and those, when I read about Doreya Shafiq and the 1,500 women who stormed the Egyptian parliament demanding the right to vote, I learned a very important lesson about revolution and the necessity of feminism to be central to revolution, because too often revolution is against the state and the oppression of the state. And that's where it begins and ends, because that's how men understand oppression. Men understand very well what the state does to them, but they don't understand what they, along with the state, through what I call the trifecta of patriarchy, a triangle, do to the rest of us, women and non-binary and trans people. Because if the state, so when I was writing my first book, Headscarves and Hymens, Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution, I wrote this book very soon after the revolutions across the region that are often called the Arab Spring. And I wrote this book because I found again and again that so much of the revolutionary thinking was missing feminism, was missing gender equality. And when I would say this to my fellow Egyptians, the men sounded like the man who said to Nawal Saadawi, "You are ruining the reputation of Egypt." The men would say to me, revolutionary men would say to me, Mona, this is not the time for feminism. We have to get rid of torture. We have to liberate political prisoners. We have to fix the education. We have so many things to do, and then we can get to feminism. As if women are a small minority who can be put in the kitchen and in the bedroom and told to wait. Even though women, as Egyptian women and as Syrian women and as Yemeni women and as Libyan women, we risked our lives for the revolution. I paid a high price for the Egyptian, to take part in liberating ourselves in the Egyptian revolution, but we are always told to wait. Women are always told to wait. And so, they would say to me, nobody is free. You keep talking about feminism and liberating women, but nobody is free in Egypt. And I would say to them, it's true, nobody is free in Egypt because the state oppresses everyone. But when you look at this trifecta of patriarchy, you will see that the state and the street is the public space, where we walk with men, that is dominated by men, where your president, Claudia Sheinbaum, was sexually assaulted by a man, and also workplaces. So the state and the street and the home together oppress women. And so, but men only see what the state does to them. They don't see how they collaborate with the state in the street and in the home to oppress women and non-binary people, non-binary and gender expansive people. And I always say that the most difficult revolution is the revolution in the home, because every dictator goes home. So the dictator in the state, he goes home, and it's often a he. And the dictator in the workplace, and the dictator on the street, even when he's a drunk man assaulting the woman president, he goes home. And at home, of course, there is the father, there is the brother, there is the husband, there is tradition, there is religion, there is all of that. So I began to write about the trifecta of patriarchy. And I find that the trifecta of patriarchy is a very useful model to take to every country that I go to. Because when I began to talk about feminism in my part of the world, when I live elsewhere, because I now live in the United States, I began to see a very disturbing pattern. And I especially saw this when I wrote Headscarves and Hymens, Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution. And my book was translated into 13 languages. So I went to Norway, I went to Denmark, I went to Hungary, I went to Spain, I went to Italy, I went to France, I went to the Netherlands, I went to so many different countries to talk about the feminist revolution, the necessity of the feminist revolution. But I found that the audience there, which in these Western European, Northern European countries was mostly white, They mostly understood feminism as a problem of misogyny, almost as if it's an argument between a husband and wife. And they did not see that if you are not a white woman, it's not just about misogyny, it's also about racism. It's also, if you are not a woman from the elite class, it's also about class. It's also about capitalism. It's also about homophobia. I'm bisexual. It's also about homophobia. It's also about ableism. It's also about all the bigotry that every society has. So I am not fighting just misogyny. I am fighting many oppressions, because patriarchy is a system of oppressions that privileges male dominance. But sometimes there are women who also are privileged by this system of oppressions, and we call them patriarchal women. I call these women foot soldiers of the patriarchy. They are the workers for the patriarchy. They are the soldiers for the patriarchy. I know that you have patriarchal women in Mexico. They are the ones who are accusing Claudia Sheinbaum of staging it, of deserving it, of being a bad president and being a bad woman. So it's not just, patriarchy isn't men. Patriarchy is a system of oppressions that privileges the dominance of men and the dominance of some women who benefit from patriarchy. So I would talk to these audiences in Northern European countries and often the United States, and I would remind them again and again that patriarchy doesn't just live over there in the Middle East or in Africa or in India. It lives in your country. It lives in your home. It lives in your streets. And one of the best examples of that was when I was promoting my book in the US, and I was speaking in Texas, which is one of the most conservative states in the United States. And a white woman raised her hand to ask me a question, and she said, I lived in Egypt, during the revolution, and it was so wonderful to see the revolution. I love Egypt, and I want to know how I can help Egyptian women, especially against female genital mutilation and cutting, which is a big problem in Egypt and across many countries on the African continent. And I was amazed by this question, because this was in 2015. It was when we still had Roe v. Wade, the federally protected right to an abortion in the US, which has now disappeared. But we knew that the Christian conservatives in the United States were working very hard to destroy abortion rights in the United States and gender rights in the United States. And this was a form of patriarchy in the United States that we had to fight, the trifecta of patriarchy. And Texas was one of the states that was in the forefront of this fight against abortion rights and against feminism. Because when I spoke, and this woman said to me, how can I help Egyptian women? Texas had gone from having 40 clinics that provided abortion care to 5. Now there is no abortion care in Texas. So I asked this woman, why do you want to help women so far away in Egypt, and you don't see what's happening to you here in Texas? Why? And one of the women sitting next to her, also from Texas, said to her, do you not know that Texas is a state of Christian fundamentalism and extreme militarism? So we were both asking her, why are you looking to women so far away that you want to save from their patriarchy when you have patriarchy right here? And the reason, of course, is that it's much easier to fight to save other women and much harder to fight to save yourself, because you know that your dictator, your husband, your father, your brother, the men who look like you and who all go home are much harder to fight than the men who are far away, who are oppressing other women. And so everywhere I went, I would remind people of this, that you have patriarchy in your country. You have patriarchy in your state and in your street and in your home. But it's much easier to see patriarchy far away than to see patriarchy at home. Because when you see patriarchy at home, then you have two choices. One, to accept that you are not free and you are oppressed, and therefore, what are you going to do? Or two, to accept that you are not free and you must fight. And so now you must fight. And this became very obvious it was 2021 or 2022, when woman life freedom, the revolution in Iran happened. And when the revolution in Iran happened, it was just a few months after the Supreme Court in the United States, which is full of Christian conservative zealots that Donald Trump put on the Supreme Court to destroy abortion rights. So they had already destroyed abortion rights earlier that year. And then Iranian feminists and Iranian queer people rose up because a woman called Mahsa Jinnah Amini was killed in police custody because she was not wearing proper hijab. And I was watching the Iranian revolution from my home in the US, and it was incredible. It was incredible to see feminists and queer people rise up against one of the toughest theocracies in the world and to burn things. You know, this revolution is not just going out on the street and saying down, down with the regime. It's also confronting the regime. It's risking your life. It's saying, I am willing to die to be free. And we were all watching this. And the amazing thing for me, again, just like the woman in Texas, was all of these white women in the United States saying, yay, Iranian women, yay, fighting the patriarchy, yay, fighting the Muslim zealots. But these same white women in the United States were not fighting the Christian zealots. I honestly thought when the Supreme Court overturned abortion rights in the United States, that women in the United States would burn the Supreme Court. I was like, that's it. They're going to march in the streets now and they're going to destroy things because what more are they waiting for, you know? Nothing. There were a few protests, but that was it. I was like, where the fuck is your revolutionary anger? Where is your resistance to your theocracy? And so I began to write to remind white women in the United States. I wrote an open letter to them for my newsletter, Feminist Right, which has become one of my most popular essays, called Dear White Women Cheering Iranian Women. And I said to them, I am glad that you see how brave Iranian feminists and queer people are, but where is your courage? You can see the theocracy in Iran because it's easy to see a zealot, a religious zealot, when he doesn't look like you. Because for so many white people in the United States and Western Europe, a religious zealot is a brown man with a beard, is a Muslim man. It's very easy to look at the Taliban. It's very easy to see the Ayatollah in Iran and say, this is theocracy. But it's not so easy to see the evangelicals in the United States and say, these are zealots, religious zealots, and this is the theocracy. Because the Christian zealots in the United States look like these white women who are cheering Iranian women. Because these white Christian zealots are their fathers, their brothers, their uncles, all the people who vote for the Republican Party, and even in the Democrats too, who don't see that Christian zealotry in their uncles and in their brothers and in their fathers. And so this has become my message now. This is the way that I'm now ruining the reputation of the right wing and the Christian zealots in the United States, because somebody has to shake these women awake. Someone has to shake the United States awake, because it is in the grip of a Christian fundamentalism that I compare to the Muslim fundamentalism that many people see very easily. But the Christian fundamentalism in the United States is much more dangerous than the Muslim fundamentalism in Egypt or the Muslim Brotherhood. And the reason for that is the Muslim Brotherhood influence is limited to Egypt or other countries in the region. But the Christian fundamentalism in the United States is the most powerful and wealthiest country in the history of humanity. It is the empire of the world right now. It is the country that influences everything that is happening. Every headline in the world today is about Trump and the way that he is destroying our world. That Christian fundamentalism is dangerous to the entire world. The Muslim fundamentalism that everyone in the United States can see far away is dangerous, yes, to me as a Muslim woman living in Egypt or a woman of Muslim descent, but I already fight it. But who is fighting the Christian zealotry? Who is fighting the white supremacist Christian patriarchy? The black feminist bell hooks would often call it white supremacist, capitalist, imperialist patriarchy, because that's what it is. And I call bell hooks intentionally the black feminist, because the feminists that I most identify with in the United States are black women and Latinx women, because they understand that feminism is this trifecta, the state, the street, and the home, and they understand that feminism is not just the argument between a husband and wife, it is the argument between us and patriarchy. And patriarchy is many oppressions, not just misogyny. The Chicana feminist Gloria Anzaldúa wrote an open letter in 1981 called Letter to Third World Women Writers. We don't use the phrase third world anymore, but back then it used to be used. And Gloria Anzaldúa told us that a woman of color who writes often writes under a triple or a quadruple oppression: misogyny, racism, capitalism, so many oppressions. And when she writes, she knows that she is writing against big forces that will resist her. Because a woman who writes has power, and a woman who writes is feared. So she was saying, write so that you can have power, so that the patriarchy fears you. And so this is my message to everyone who thinks that they are a feminist. How many oppressions are you fighting? And do you recognize the patriarchy when the patriarchy looks like you? Do you recognize the patriarchy when the patriarchy is your father or your uncle or your husband or your brother or your aunt or your mother who votes to destroy other women's rights in the United States or here in Mexico or any other country? Because I am not interested in a feminism. First of all, I'm not interested in a feminism that wants a peace treaty with patriarchy. I will not sign a peace treaty with patriarchy. I am at war with patriarchy. I am interested in destroying the patriarchy. I'm not interested in destroying men, because men are not the patriarchy. I'm interested in destroying the patriarchy. And anyone who fights with me against the patriarchy is my comrade. But the women who are patriarchal women, wherever they live, in the Netherlands, in Mexico, in the United States, they are not my sisters and they are not my comrades. Because like Gloria Anzaldúa and like Noelis Saadawi and like Bell Hooks and like so many black feminists, like June Jordan, whose words I have. June Jordan was a black bisexual poet who wrote incredible essays and poetry. And I have on my arm tattooed, "We are the ones we have been waiting for." And this is from a poem that June Jordan wrote in 1981 for South African women when they were fighting against the oppression and patriarchy of apartheid in South Africa. And this is what we need. We need a global solidarity among feminists who recognize that patriarchy in all of its manifestations, not just misogyny, is our enemy. We need to recognize that patriarchy is universal. It's not just the Taliban or the Ayatollahs in Iran. It is the patriarchy here in Mexico. It is the patriarchy in Texas. It is the patriarchy that is so racist that, Zoran Mamdani, I'm sure you all know, is going to be the next mayor in New York City. And I am very happy. Yes, exactly. And he is a man who I consider a comrade. He has appointed a committee to create his government to run New York City. And his organizing committee is all women, because he recognizes that that's what you have to do to fight misogyny, racism, capitalism. And his main message is to make New York City affordable. So he recognizes that capitalism, New York City is the capital of capitalism, you know? It is the wealthiest city of the wealthiest country in the history of humanity. And here is a young man, 34 years old, recognizing all of these oppressions. He is talking about universal childcare. He is talking about the practicalities of feminism that we often hear about in theory. And he is showing us in practice by having women, feminist women, not patriarchal women, who are helping him to make this reality, to make New York, maybe he doesn't say, I'm going to make New York City more feminist, but this is what he is doing in effect. So this is my message as a feminist, that I am not fighting men, I am fighting patriarchy. That I am fighting patriarchy that is universal, not just the patriarchy that looks like me, but the patriarchy that looks like you, and the patriarchy that looks like other people, but who I recognize, which I recognize, because I am familiar with patriarchy and the ways that it uses the trifecta of patriarchy to oppress us all. I was talking with Katerina when we were getting coffee just before I began about, I am a feminist anarchist, and I am an anarchist because I refuse the domination and the hierarchy of anyone. I want to be free. I do not want to be dominated by anyone. And I was telling her that I learned a few years ago that as early as the 1880s in Argentina, anarchist feminists considered to be the first organized group of anarchist feminists launched a newspaper in Argentina called La Voz. And this newspaper would share anarchist feminist thinking as a way to resist the misogyny and the oppressions of leftist men. I think we can all agree that leftist men are not free of misogyny. Leftist men understand that they fight the state. They only see the state. They don't see the trifecta of the street and the home alongside the state. And these anarchist feminists in Argentina in the 1880s were saying something that myself and other feminists continue to say today, which is, it is not our role to raise children of any man, leftist man or right-wing man. It is not our job to cook and clean and at the same time fight the revolution to liberate us all. Because men just fight the revolution and women are supposed to fight the revolution outside and inside. And that same message was said in Spain, in Catalonia, during the anarchist fight against the fascism of Franco, of General Franco, where the feminist women, they didn't call themselves feminists, but in practice they were feminists. They created a group called Las Mujeres Libres. Am I saying this right? Las Mujeres Libres? The free women of Spain. And they would say the same message. They would say, the compañeros understand liberation outside the home, in the factory, in the workplace, in the cafe. But when the compañeros come home, they take liberation off with their shoes outside the door, and inside, there is no more liberation. And that is the message, because one of the letters to the newspaper La Voz in Argentina in the 1880s was from a very frustrated anarchist feminist who wrote, I want no gods, I want no bosses, I want no husbands. This message was in 1880s Argentina. No God, no boss, no husband. And this is the message that I carry today in the United States against the fascism of Donald Trump, here in Mexico against the fascism of your right wing and anybody else who is trying to destroy patriarchy, and against the leftists, whether it's Scheinbaum or anyone else who does not promote a feminism that liberates us all, that includes the class struggle as well as the gender struggle, and against anyone who does not recognize that patriarchy is not just universal, but patriarchy is something that we have to fight wherever. The revolution has to be inside us, and we have to carry it wherever we go in the world. Because unless we connect the oppression of the street and the oppression of the home to the oppression of the state, then the revolution is incomplete. And to do that, I insist again and again on being a savage and dangerous woman, because I speak the truth, like Nawal Saadawi, and the truth is savage and dangerous. And I realize the more outspoken I've become as a feminist, the more I am accused of ruining the reputation of Egypt. And I welcome it. I say, great. I have inherited what Nawal Saadawi has done, because for such a long time, she was a great teacher. And so this is my message to you now, to be savage and dangerous in your fight against patriarchy, and to ruin the reputation of anyone who benefits from patriarchy, and ruin the reputation of your country, of your religion, of your family. Have no allegiance to anyone except an allegiance to liberation. Because we've seen over the past 2 years with the genocide of Israel against the Palestinians in Gaza, we've seen how so many people were silent against it because they benefit. Because that form of fascism is a form of fascism, fascist patriarchy that was upheld, financed, and armed by the United States and so many collaborators in the so-called West. We've seen that fascist patriarchy in so many other countries, in Sudan, where women are raped and people are starved in the civil war between the Sudanese militia and the Sudanese regime. We see that fascist patriarchy, that capitalist patriarchy, that patriarchy that is transphobic and homophobic in so many parts of the world. So, I end my message with, be savage and dangerous, have allegiance only to liberation, and always remember to fuck the patriarchy. Thank you. I hope you understood me and I wasn't speaking too fast.
Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias. Abrimos una sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Adelante. Aprovechen que la tenemos aquí. Sí.
In Mexico, women didn't have the right to vote until the 1950s. I can't remember exactly.
Could you speak a bit louder? I can't hear you.
In Mexico,
Yeah.
Women didn't have the right
Yes.
to vote
Mm.
until 1950s.
Yeah.
I remember exactly the year.
Ah.
And historians have told me, well, when the proposal was brought to the president at the time of Lázaro Cárdenas in the 1930s, he was a leftist president. And the government didn't want to give women the right to vote because they were afraid that women were going to vote for the right. So the reform was postponed until the 1950s.
Wow.
And they told me, well, what happened was that at the time of Cárdenas, the Spanish Republican government gave women the right to vote. And they voted for the right.
Wow.
So they said, we don't want that to happen in
Yeah.
Mexico.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
Yes.
Historians say why President Cárdenas didn't establish that right of women. So I'd like to hear your point of view, and that also has happened in the United States.
Yes. Yes.
I lived in the United States several years, and I noticed that feminists were divided in conservative and liberals. And for example, Sarah Palin was candidate for vice president just recently, defines herself as a feminist. And the Republicans say, hey, look, we have feminists in the Republican Party.
Yes.
And Sarah Palin is very, very radical.
Yeah.
And she's extreme right.
Yes.
Okay. So I say, well, what's going on?
Yeah.
In the feminist movement around the world.
Yeah.
Not only that, but I don't know if you know that during the first election of Donald Trump,
Yes.
more than 50% of white women voted for Donald Trump. And the New York Times interviewed several women and told them why are you voting for Donald Trump?
Yes.
He's a misogynist.
Yes.
He is sexual harasser. And some women say, well, that's the way men are.
Yeah.
So that's wrong.
Yeah.
But we have more important problems here. For example, migrants who are invading our country, Chinese who are taking our jobs,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And so what's going on here?
Yeah.
I'd like to understand more the feminist movement in political terms, right?
Yeah.
Can I add a comment?
Yes.
Because this reminds me of something that happened in Italy and actually in my own family. After World War II, we had this big referendum voting whether Italy was to go on being a monarchy or a republic. And my great-grandfather didn't let the women in the family go vote because he knew he was a socialist. But they went to church, so he knew they would vote for the monarchy. So he went like full patriarchal leftist mode and shut the doors and no, you're not going because I know you're going to vote for the monarchy.
Wow.
And this is like, wow, what do I do with that piece of history?
Yeah. No, I understand. Thank you for your question. I've written a lot about this. I've written a lot about it in my second book, The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls, in which I created sins. They're not really sins, but I'm taking the Christian, deadly sins, and I call them necessary sins for women's liberation from patriarchy. And the sins are anger, attention, profanity, ambition, power, violence, and lust. And I encourage women and girls to embrace all of these sins. And so in the sin of power, I write extensively about exactly your question. And there are many reasons for this. I think, so yes, I think first we have to, let's talk about the United States first. The United States is a country in which race determines so much. And so it is the majority of white women voters in the United States for the past 70 years, with the exception of maybe one election, the majority of white women voters have voted Republican, which is incredible because the Republicans are misogynists, are racist, are classist, all of this. So what is happening? What is going on? When political scientists analyze this, they find a difference between white women who are married and white women who are unmarried. And white women who are unmarried are very similar in their voting patterns to black and women of color, and that is they vote Democrat. But when a white woman gets married, she starts voting Republican. And when they talk to them about that, they will often say it's because they worry about their husband's salary, they worry about their husband's position in society. So it's been described by some political scientists as benign patriarchy. And I don't believe patriarchy is ever benign. But what I describe these white women are doing is they are favoring their race against their gender, because they gain power through proximity to the white men in their lives. When their husband is making a lot of money and is not being taxed a lot, they benefit. So they benefit from being proximal to a white man in the United States. And the Republican Party is the one that goes around saying no taxes for the rich and, all of this. So that's what's happening with white women. And they don't care about Donald Trump because it's more important to them that their whiteness. The United States is also going through a period of great transformation. White people in the US, already in the state of Texas, are barely a majority. And across the country, they will not be a majority by 2040. White people will be one of many groups equal standing. And so what the Republican Party represents is white supremacy. And this is what white women are told, especially the white women who are married, is to their advantage. Now, I don't consider someone like Sarah Palin a feminist. What I think is happening with Sarah Palin, and do you remember when Donald Trump nominated Gina Haspel to be head of the CIA? And she became the first woman head of the CIA. A very interesting thing happened that I think answers what you're saying. The Republicans who hate feminists, and I never use I don't believe that conservatives are feminists, because I think conservatism is antithetical to feminism, because conservatism is about a status quo and feminism is about destroying the status quo. So the conservatives who usually criticize, especially feminists of color like myself, because we talk about identity politics. And what is identity politics? It is about, what we say is, when I, as Mona, who was born in Egypt, who was born to a Muslim family, who was not white, who was bisexual, who was not rich, when I walk through the world, my identities, plural, determine how the world treats me. And if I walked through the world as a white Christian heterosexual woman, I would be treated very differently. So identity politics are very important in the way that I am treated. Conservatives in the United States say, no, you're just using this as an excuse to moan and to complain and to always be the victim. But then, when the conservatives want to use women as an example of, look, we don't hate women, we're not misogynist, they elevate some women and they point to them and say, hey, feminists, you should celebrate. Don't you employ identity politics? Here is a woman, celebrate her. But then I ask, this woman who has been elevated, who elevated her? Who gave her permission? Japan just recently appointed a woman prime minister, yeah? Japan is one of the most patriarchal countries in the world. And the woman prime minister, the first woman prime minister, is from the right wing. In the United States, when we finally get a woman president, she will be a Republican. Because that's how it works. In these conservative structures, women are given permission to rise to power by the patriarchy in exchange for becoming a foot soldier of the patriarchy. So I look at Sarah Palin. She's against abortion. She's against gender equality and liberation. She's against destroying bigotry. She's against transgender rights. She's not a feminist. What she is she's a foot soldier to patriarchy. And another irony, and this is where I really hold the leftists accountable. The Labour Party in the UK has never appointed, so the Labour Party is supposed to be leftist in the UK. I grew up in the UK. The UK, the first Prime Minister was Margaret Thatcher from the right wing. In the UK, the Labour Party has never had a woman leader and never had a black or a man of colour leader. The Conservative Party in the UK, the right wing, have had 4 women leaders and have had 3 women prime ministers and a brown man prime minister. How? You know? So this is what you're asking me, right? Sarah Palin was running as vice president. I guarantee that our first woman president in the United States will be a Republican. And another irony, Donald Trump is second only to Obama in the number of women he has appointed in cabinet positions. And you look at this and you say, Donald Trump is a misogynist. He's a sexual predator. Donald Trump hates women. And he puts women in these strategically powerful positions because it gives him what we say is plausible deniability. Because when we say you are a misogynist, you are a sexual predator, he says, how am I a misogynist? I have appointed 8 women to positions of power. But we know that these women, like for example, the Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, these women were appointed to do a specific job. And that is, as a woman, to destroy other women's rights. So that they can say, I, Donald Trump, did not destroy your abortion right. The Supreme Court did, with the help of Amy Coney Barrett, another woman. So this is a fight among women, not me. But we have to recognize the way patriarchy elevates foot soldiers of the patriarchy. So, and this is why I quote the anarchist feminists from Argentina and the anarchists from Spain. Oops, sorry, I touched the microphone there. The anarchists in Spain and the anarchists in Argentina recognize that the left have a very big blind spot when it comes to feminism. And so it makes them fail again and again in not being expansive in the positions of power. And the right wing sees this, and the right wing sees that there are women who benefit from patriarchy and benefit from conservatism in exchange for shutting up about feminism. So they say, okay, you're okay with Donald Trump and all his fascist fuckery? Okay, you go to the top now. So this is not feminism. What they've done is they have used the benefits of feminism, which said liberation of women and women in all positions, to cut feminism at the knees. And I look at these women and they are destroying feminism. They are not feminists. They are enemies of feminism and foot soldiers of the patriarchy. This is a long and complicated answer that I've given you, but it is a very disturbing phenomenon, and I will end by saying this is also happening in Europe. Giorgia Meloni in Italy, Marine Le Pen in France, Alice Weidel in the AfD in Germany, and we are seeing, there was a survey done in 2017 by a research center in Germany that showed that more and more white women, we have to say white women because the racial element here is very important, more and more white women in Europe are voting for the right-wing parties. And analysts have said that this is not because the right-wing parties believe in gender liberation or gender equality. What the right-wing parties do is they have strategically placed a woman at the top, like Giorgia Meloni. I'm sorry I keep pointing to you. You're not Giorgia Meloni, but because you're Italian. Giorgia Meloni is over here. Fuck Giorgia Meloni. You're not Giorgia Meloni. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So these right-wing parties, like Giorgia Meloni is the head of the Brothers of Italy. She is a woman who's head of a party that says Brothers of Italy, and she's not changed the name of, she's happy to be the one woman who leads a party of brothers. Same with Alice Weidel. Alice Weidel is a gay woman at the head of a homophobic party. Alice Weidel is a white woman whose partner is a brown woman from Sri Lanka, and she is the head of a racist party. Alice Weidel in the AfD in Germany is anti-immigrant, and the babysitter for her baby with her lesbian partner is a Syrian refugee in a party that is anti-immigrant. Do you see the contradictions? And so the analysts in the German Research Center who found that these white women are voting for the right-wing parties, they said these parties do not represent gender parity. They do not have women as the majority in the party. They have women in strategic leadership positions. And these parties are, as you said about the women who vote for Trump who are concerned about migration, these parties use brown and black men who are coming to rape you. Donald Trump says this. Donald Trump had ads in his campaign of a big menacing brown man, and he constantly talks about illegal aliens who are raping our girls and women. Our girls and women. And he rapes his girls and women. But he's saying basically, only white men can rape white girls and women. But these brown men coming from Venezuela, they are not allowed to rape girls and our girls and women. And that's what they're doing in Europe. They are using, they are inciting a race war, and they are promising these white women benefits to have more white children. Because I don't know if you're familiar with the replacement theory that these racists are saying. They're saying that white people are being replaced by brown people because the birth rate is in decline. This is why the racial element is so important. And so all these right-wing parties, Donald Trump calls himself the fertilization president. Can you imagine? Because he wants white women to become pregnant and make white babies. So the end, all of this that I'm saying, I could write 10 books. The end of this is white supremacy feels threatened. And they understand that the wombs of cisgender white women are now an important factory that has to produce for them white babies. This is the capitalist, white supremacist, patriarchal thinking. Make us white babies and be scared of these brown and black men, and we will protect you from brown and black men and make white babies for us. And these white women who benefit from their white husbands, who benefit from Donald Trump, say yes, we will. It's incredibly frustrating, but these white women are not feminists. They are using feminism to destroy feminism. Have I answered your complex question with a very complicated answer?
I think so. Perdón, ¿cómo vamos de tiempo? Son las 11:10. Si alguien tiene una preguntita rápido, sí, no Fred.
Thank you, Mona. As you mentioned the Iranian revolution of young women, I've seen here in Mexico that especially leftist men, but also leftist women, usually do not understand or they have these contradictions about supporting Iranian revolution because they are anti-imperialist. And then trying to not to talk about a lot about women's rights. So how can we explain to them, these leftist women and these leftist men, that being anti-imperialist is not against being patriarchal?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. This is why I mentioned the revolutionary men in Egypt who would say to me, this is not the time for feminism. As if feminism has to be put in the cupboard and made to wait, you know? Because, and this is why I hope my structure of the trifecta of patriarchy helps. Because I think leftist men understand very well the struggle against empire, which is essentially a struggle against the state. So they understand that the state, but they look at the power of the state as a cake or a pie. And they're concerned with having a slice of that cake. And I say, as an anarchist feminist, I don't want that cake. I want to make my own cake, you know? Because what happens when we all want just a piece of the cake from the state is that men get a big slice and women and non-binary people get crumbs. And I don't want crumbs. I want an entire cake. I like cake. But I don't want the cake of the state or the patriarchy. I want my own cake because I'm an anarchist, you know? So I think it's important to explain to leftist men that what they're doing when they're just against empire and the state is they are recognizing only one form of oppression, and that is the oppression of the state. And that serves them as leftist men. You know the Black Panther Party in the United States, which was a revolutionary party that created incredible resistance to the racist regime in the United States, only had one woman leader. And that one woman leader was called Elaine Brown. And she only became the leader because the founder of the Black Panther Party, Huey Newton, appointed her as leader. He elevated her, yeah? And just after a few years, she left the Black Panthers because she said, my black comrades are misogynists and I can't remain in the Black Panther Party. And the reason that she left was because one of the men severely beat up a black woman. One of the Black Panther men beat up a Black Panther woman, And the leader, Huey Newton, said it was okay. And Elaine Brown, who was the leader, said, fuck this shit, and she left. So she recognized that these supposedly revolutionary men fighting the racism and the imperialism of the US regime, the racist US regime, were not feminist and did not believe in liberation for everyone. They believed in liberation for themselves. And this is a pattern we see again and again in revolution. Men ask the rest of us, women and non-binary people, fight with me. We can be free. Let's liberate ourselves from the chains of the state and the chains of empire. And then they get a slice and then they say, okay, I am full now. You can go home and make me dinner. And I'm like, fuck you and fuck the state.
Muchísimas gracias. Les invitamos a quedarse que tenemos otra actividad, la proyección del documental Where the Olive Trees Weep. Vamos a dar unos minutitos para acomodarnos y así mientras tanto pueden tomarse fotos con ella. So we're taking a few minutes to set up the documentary.
The documentary, yeah.
And meanwhile they can take
okay.
pictures with you.
Okay, I'd be happy to.
Look, she's Marcela.
Okay.
Hola.
Hola. Hola, Marcela.